So, when is a guest actually a bad guest and you can kick them out and say goodbye? So, we're looking today on Around the World Today about bad guests when we have the state visit of the United States President. And you're listening to Around the World Today here on Real Terrio Radio Podcast.
Brought to you by Real Terrio Radio. Around the World Today here on Real Terrio Radio.
Hello and welcome to episode 8, series 2 of Around the World Today here on Real Terrio Radio Podcasts. So, the question, when does a guest turn out to be a bad guest? When do you know that, you're getting a very bad deal? Now, do you grit your teeth and, just bide your time until that guest leaves? Or do you have to say something when they, not really following the party line? And in this instance, what I'm going to talk about isn't really... Okay, so in the United Kingdom this week, today, right from yesterday until tomorrow, we have the President of the United States, Donald S.J. Trump, visiting on a state visit to the United Kingdom. Really good that the President of the US is here, and we're celebrating the fact that it's been 75 years since we invaded Europe and, ended Nazi rule. But I agree that we should have invited the President of the United States no matter who it is, because America is our strongest ally. However, when that President is, being a bad guest before they even turn up, a bit two-faced in my opinion, and doesn't actually understand anything to do with our political system, but comments on our political system like he knows it all but knows nothing about it. The UK has a different way of electing our heads of government. We have a different way of parliamentary procedure. The UK is the mother parliament, for starters, of the world. So, President Trump gave a press conference with his dear friend Theresa May, who leaves office this weekend, I believe, as leader of the Conservative Party, and in a couple of weeks she'll step down as Prime Minister. However, there are people speculating that she may stay on. I listened to the press conference and I was quite surprised that Donald Trump would want US companies to be able to get their hands on our NHS. Well, I wasn't surprised because, come to think about it, in America, Donald Trump has been quite instrumental in ending Obamacare. Obamacare had its faults, don't get me wrong, but what he effectively done is put everything back to that the most poorest in society have to, if they don't have any health insurance, they have substandard care. Where in the United Kingdom we have the National Health Service, and it's free at the point of entry, free at the point of treatment, free when you leave. It's paid for out of your national insurance contribution that everyone, even people on benefits, have to pay, or is paid for them by the state. So everyone pays a national insurance contribution into the NHS. it's like a tax. Basically, it comes out of your wages. Now, any benefit that you get is actually taxable. So, or taxable earnings. So you are paying taxes on benefits, for starters. So, the people who say that, you know, they haven't paid taxes for years, Tony Blair's government ended that. Actually, it was Margaret Thatcher's government that ended that. So, you might want to shut up. Secondly, back to the NHS. I'm going to quote Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln, the first president of the United States, said, for the United States, that it's of the people, by the people, for the people. Now, the NHS is of the people, by the people, for the people. I personally feel this, and that quotation is in a status that I've just put on my own personal social media, and I actually found it somewhere else. So, you know, I said this: how dare a man so vehemently opposed to public health plans championed by his predecessor stand here in our country, a guest of our Queen and state. Any trade deals with the UK having to include the National Health Service, our NHS is quite, to quote Abraham Lincoln, of the people, by the people, for the people. The National Health Service has saved many lives since it came in. It ended illnesses that were killing children. I talked about in the last podcast about my great uncle dying at a young age, and that one of my nana's cousins said, well, that was usual back then. I couldn't understand how that was usual, and then I remembered to myself there was no universal health care. The children, you know, stuff like this, where children today are seen, you know, by health visitors, by doctors quite regular, you know, for their first couple of years. So they're able to measure and see the growth and see what needs to be done, and if there's any deficiencies or so on, where in those days you didn't. You had to pay for, you know, treatment and stuff. So the NHS has been quite good. Or, you know, some children were short-sighted. They'd have to find, their parents would have to find the money for glasses, so some of them couldn't even see or read. You know, education, more policies. This country has a social conscience, unlike America's politicians. And our politicians, for some reason, at the end of World War II, saw what was happening, because the NHS was on the plans from before World War II. It did take a Labour government to bring it in, and it was a Liberal project, and it went across party. So I don't like it when they try and politicalise the NHS. The NHS is non-political, as far as I'm concerned. I personally believe that there shouldn't be a Minister of Health. Well, yes, there should, but this person should be a statutory appointment and should have a background in the health. It shouldn't be a Member of Parliament, because 9 times out of 10 the decisions they're making are to their party and to their party's budgets rather than to what the people and what we need, you know? That's what you hear about. The problems you hear about in the NHS aren't down to the staff in the NHS. They're down to political necessities to cut money. You know, waiting times. Well, what the government failed to tell you is that without, like, a safe number of staff members in, like, say, an operating theatre, they're not about to open a patient up, you know, for a routine surgery. So when you have short staff, you know, not enough staff to operate safely, or not enough staff in, like, a ward, so you have to close a ward, your waiting lists do go up. Because more people get ill and they're added to the waiting list. How can you treat these people if you ain't got the staff? Well, the government cut all subsidies and bursaries for NHS training. For health training in the UK, for UK people. students aren't about to spend 7 years of their money. As a student, they would have come out with more debt than they went in with. They would have been able to, it's 7 years, if that, to train to be a doctor. And that's, like, before medical school as well, I believe. So, a student can rack up quite a bit of debt. So, yesterday, back to the story, Donald Trump landed in the UK. Just before he landed, he chose to insult the democratically elected Mayor of London. You may not agree with his policies, but at the end of the day, he is the mayor, the democratically elected mayor of the capital of the United Kingdom, where he was staying. It's quite funny he criticises him for crime. Well, when you're making a state visit, the Metropolitan Police are responsible for your safety. That democratically elected mayor is one of the heads, or one of the people who are funded the Metropolitan Police, and appoints the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police with the Home Secretary. He's responsible for your safety. Not really a good idea when there's protests planned, is there? Anyhows, so yeah, before this, he called the Duchess of Sussex nasty, denied it, even though there was a video, insulted a few news agencies too, called them fake. It's quite funny, because I actually watched Fox last night, and I really have to laugh about Fox News. They call everyone besides Fox News fake. Well, firstly, I find it laughable to watch American TV news channels when, first, they can't get the country's name wrong. He isn't making a state visit to England. He's making a state visit, theoretically, to the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. This includes Scotland, Northern Ireland, England, and Wales. Not just England. He may be in the capital, which is the United Kingdom, but we all say, we have our sub-capitals, but London, to everyone, is the UK's capital. Donny got that a little wrong, and so did Fox News. Then to call the Queen, Queen Elizabeth II of Great Britain, Northern Ireland, and other realms, head of the Commonwealth. Now, I love it when they call her the Queen of England, considering the monarch of the United Kingdom hasn't been known as the Queen of England or the King of England since 1707. There has been no such title. There's nothing in law calling them this anymore. They are now known as Queen or King of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland and other territories. Head of the Commonwealth, and so on. So, you're not going to get the facts right, because obviously they can't be bothered to look first at the name of the country that their president is visiting, and secondly, they can't get the head of state's title right to start that off. So, you're going to get a bunch of poop. Then, basically, they go on about the steel industry. Now, in the UK, there used to be a company nationalised called British Steel. Now, British Steel was then sold to Tata Steel. Since then, Tata still own their production plants. A new steel company has come around in 2016 and was founded, and it's called British Steel Limited, and they only have two production sites in the UK. Tata Steel Europe, another company in the UK, currently owns approximately 11 sites within the United Kingdom, and 4 of which are in Wales, 2 of which I live in the middle of and are in my city region. According to Fox News, our steel industry has ended because this company's gone bankrupt and no one will buy it, and no one will, and it, you know, it's fine. What they fail to say is that when Tata Steel wanted to sell the bigger operation, the government were in uproar about it, the Welsh government as well. And our politicians were talking about renationalising steel. Tata came up with a deal with the governments, and, you know, they've stayed. British Steel only owned 2 sites, and if Tata sold them off, they were obviously unprofitable. Scunthorpe Steel site. It was sold to a capital firm. You know. The problem you have is that these sites are only sold for £1. The sum of £1. Obviously they weren't making money. So obviously they were going to go bust. If she had done her research, she would have done this. However, the newsreader then went on to bash opposition members of our parliament, who weren't in government, who aren't her views. To me, this same channel complains when British people are getting mixed up in our politics, but when your president says that Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage would be very good either in leading the Brexit, of leaving, or actually, being Prime Minister, one has to wonder what's going on in this man's head. No, you stay out of our politics and we'll stay out of your politics. It's quite simple, really. You're a guest in this country, so it's not something you talk about. I'm sure the Queen, who's also Queen of Canada, could, possibly maybe send one of the younger royals to Canada come the next presidential election. And as they're the head of state of Canada, probably suggest that they vote for Donald Trump's opponent. That, possibly would be the same. But anyway, when does a guest become a bad guest? When, you're sucking up to the person who invited you, or you thought invited you, but actually the Queen themselves and the royal family are being forced upon by the government to hold a state visit. So, what can you do? Because Donald Trump wants the state visit before Donald Trump's election, so he could use it as, I've been to see the Queen. Yes, his mum was Scottish. Yes, they may have, he may love the Queen like most British people do. After all, he is he's a first-generation American. His children are second-generation British. Third-generation British. He is second-generation British. So he has, his affinity to us here in Britain is a little bit closer to his German roots, shall we say. But when his family were kicked out of Germany, anyway, what can you do? But anyway, our NHS is not for sale. Our NHS it's so good. It really is. It has its faults. But it amazes me how they do it every day with the money or the funding that they get from our government. And nurses and doctors are the ones doing the work. Porters, cleaners, cooks, nurses, pharmacists, physiotherapists, these people are doing the work. They're going in, chaplains even. They're going into the hospitals, they're working. They're, it's in the best interest of everyone. They don't work for a conglomerate company that cares about throughput or output. They shouldn't. Do you know what I mean? Or they shouldn't have to work in this pressure. It's about how you should save the person's life. So we've got what Donald Trump said today. Here we go.
I think we're going to have a great and very comprehensive trade deal. I can't hear him.
It's our National Health Service. He says, should the National Health Service be on the table?
Look, I think everything with a trade deal is on the table. When you're dealing in trade, everything's on the table. So NHS or anything else, or a lot more than that. But everything will be on the table, absolutely. Okay.
Could a Trump trade deal be disastrous for our UK? The man doesn't seem to understand. The NHS is not for sale. The NHS is ours. The only reason he wants to break up the NHS is because whenever people in his country say, well, shouldn't we be looking after our country? Britain does, Canada does, it means he has to come after our NHS. They have to privatise it. They have to make it, profitable. So when does this profitability stop? Where you're not, performing operations because you can't perform these operations in your local hospital anymore because they're not specialised and the hospital ain't making money. And only one hospital in the country does the operation because, for something quite simple that at this moment in time that they do at every hospital. It's just ridiculous. Private companies shouldn't be running our NHS at all. It doesn't work. It really doesn't. But back to the main question, when does a guest become a bad guest? Yesterday he gave a really good speech to the Queen, paid homage to the Queen. He was well behaved during the royal parts and the ceremonial parts yesterday. It's only when he does the political stuff that he becomes a naughty little child that you just wish to put in the corner and say, read this book, Donny, I'll go and do the big boy stuff. But actually, you can't do this to him because he's the President of the United States. And yes, it goes back to, we should recognise the fact that he's the President of the United States. He is accorded the rights of that office. We, as the United Kingdom, our first citizen, our Queen, has met the first citizen or the first family of the United States. This is fair. But he should learn some dignity with that office. He is not here as Donald Trump, candidate. He is here as the President Donald Trump, President of the United States. He is representing his country. So you need to be dignified. And this man does not have the dignity of a statesman. He thinks he does. He doesn't. So, Her Majesty the Queen gave this speech last night.
Mr. President, I'm delighted to welcome you and Mrs. Trump to Buckingham Palace this evening, just 12 months after our first meeting at Windsor. Visits by American presidents always remind us of the close and long-standing friendship between the United Kingdom and the United States. And I'm so glad that we have another opportunity to demonstrate the immense importance that both our countries attach to our relationship. In the coming days, you will see some of our most treasured historical buildings, speak to the business leaders whose expertise and innovation drive our economies, and meet members of our armed services, past and present. You will also travel to Portsmouth and Normandy to commemorate the 75th anniversary of D-Day. On that day, and on many occasions since, the armed forces of both our countries fought side by side to defend our cherished values of liberty and democracy. Mr. President, in your State of the Union address this year, you paid tribute to some of the American heroes who risked their lives, and we owe an immeasurable debt to the British, American, and Allied soldiers who began the liberation of Europe on the 6th of June, 1944. I paid my first state visit to your country at the invitation of President Eisenhower. As Supreme Allied Commander, he had ultimate responsibility for the execution of the Normandy landings. In his headquarters in St. James's Square, not far from Buckingham Palace, British and American officers worked closely together to plan the freedom of a continent. And it would be no exaggeration to say that millions of lives depended on their common endeavor. As we face the new challenges of the 21st century, the anniversary of D-Day reminds us of all that our countries have achieved together. After the shared sacrifices of the Second World War, Britain and the United States worked with other allies to build an assembly of international institutions to ensure that the horrors of conflict would never be repeated. While the world has changed, we are forever mindful of the original purpose of these structures, nations working together to safeguard a hard-won peace. Of course, it is not only our security which unites us, but our strong cultural links and shared heritage. Every year, there are almost 4 million visits by Americans to the United Kingdom, with a great number claiming British descent. And with your own Scottish ancestry, Mr. President, you too have a particular connection to this country. We are also bound by the strength and breadth of our economic ties as the largest investors in each other's economies. British companies in the United States employ over 1 million Americans, and the same is true vice versa. Mr. President, as we look to the future, I'm confident that our common values and shared interests will continue to unite us. Tonight we celebrate an alliance that has helped to ensure the safety and prosperity of both our peoples for decades, and which I believe will endure for many years to come. Ladies and gentlemen, I invite you all to rise and drink a toast to President and Mrs. Trump, to the continued friendship between our two nations, and to the health, prosperity, and happiness of the people of the United States.
So, the Queen's speech was about 6 minutes long with the national anthem at the end before they clink glasses. The problem is, that was really a lesson for Donald Trump about democracy. You could tell in the Queen's tone of when she mentioned democracy that she was having a slight go. And reminding him that he's, democracy. So today, Sadiq Khan was asked by the BBC about, Donald Trump and all of this, and this is what he said.
I think it's really important that we have good relations with the USA, and that includes the President. They're our closest ally, and we have with them a special relationship. But my objection is for him to receive a state visit, a state banquet, and all that it entails. So I think we've got to be very careful about not giving the impression that we condone some of the things that he's said and done over the last 2-3 years, from separating children from their parents on the Mexican border, to using racist, derogatory and offensive language, to walking away from the Paris climate change agreement, to rolling back the progress made on LGBT plus rights, or rolling back the reproductive rights of women. And I think also I'm worried about the fact that the far-right movement around the world sees Donald Trump as their poster boy in countries like Hungary, France, Italy, and even this country. Views that were on the fringes, far-right extreme views, are now being normalised because they've been given succor by Donald Trump.
You, of course, as well have been attacked on social media for referring to Donald Trump in these terms. I mean, do you think it's useful to take him on in these spats, if I can call them that, between you on social media? Is that a way, the best way, the most effective way of getting your message across, do you think, and your opposition to what he stands for?
Well, I'm a bit surprised that the President of the USA would, frankly speaking, behave like an 11-year-old and resort to name-calling. If he wants to have a discussion, and I'd welcome a discussion about some of the issues that we disagree about, we should do so. I think it's important for our Prime Minister, by the way, not to do a Hugh Grant Love Actually moment, but actually to express to him her concerns in relation to some of the things that he's said and done that are the complete opposite of what we have always had in common. So we've always had in common religious freedom. We've always had in common equality. And this of all weeks, when we commemorate the D-Day landings, the sacrifices made by brave men and women from the UK, the USA, New Zealand, Australia, Canada, other allies, which was about, these religious freedoms and equality, we should be remembering these were hard-fought rights. And I do worry that you've got the leader of America who's seen as a poster boy for far-right movements across the globe.
I kind of agree. We've a couple of things of what you're saying, but I don't agree with some of them. So, but you can take your own. Back to earlier when I was mentioning Fox News, I found what I was listening to, and I'm going to play it, and she has a little hissy fit, but here we go.
Soggy weather held off, and the sun even broke through today here in London as President Trump kicked off his 3-day state visit to one of America's oldest and strongest allies. Well, the pomp and circumstance that...
Well, basically, just from this report, she's set back Anglo-US relations by about 25 years. I just find it appalling, to tell you the truth. The Americans are afraid of Europe. People in the UK are calling Trump a legend. According to some people, his toast to the Queen was exceptional. Yes, it was great, but it wasn't written by Donald Trump. It was written by his speechwriter. Come on! So, yeah, anyway... back to the main question, because I'm not going to play all of this, because if I wanted to play, stuff that made Donald Trump's arse look good, when actually it isn't. These people are just crazy. They used to work for Rupert Murdoch, they don't anymore, because he's soaked up. Anyway, They now work for Mickey Mouse. I find that hilarious. Anyway, so when does a guest become a bad guest? So, should we kick him out? Should we just grin and bear it for another 24 hours, people? And then just say, you're not coming back. You know, yes, I understand the importance of a state visit, and I understand that we have to recognise him, but however, sometimes maybe not give him a press conference. Do you know what I mean? Just don't give him a microphone to talk to. A photo shoot, a couple of photos. Just don't give him a microphone to talk into. Then you won't have this. You'll just have his tweets, and the tweets are fine. And it turns out that right now that he's meeting Mr. Nigel Farage. Now, like I just said, he's now meeting Nigel Farage. He was asked this.
If he asks me to, I will. He indicated there that he would like to meet. I guess it depends how busy he is. But look, I've met him many times before when I've been across in Washington, and very often it's kind of, oh, do you know what? I'm free. Does Nigel want to come and see me? So I'll be waiting for the call this afternoon.
We're in a usual position, aren't we, with a Trump visit, where the usual suspects come out, Sadiq Khan, the London mayor, Jeremy Corbyn and others, and they see their main duty is to scream as loudly as they can about how awful he is.
Democratic duty.
And yet I detect, certainly from the coverage in the papers today of last night's state banquet, there's clearly a softening in this country. It may just be we're getting used to Donald Trump, but clearly a softening. And I think the Queen is having a large part to do with that. The way that she greets him, the warmth that she shows towards him.
They're seeing an American president who got elected, making a series of promises, and actually
I'm sorry, but he wasn't elected, Nigel. Donald Trump went through to the Electoral College, meaning that it was 500 people that voted, not the entire population of the United States. So, in the United Kingdom, we elect a member of parliament on the basis of one person, one vote. They elect on a percentage of one person, one vote, then take that percentage to an election college to ratify the result, and then their vote counts more. So I'm sorry, but what's the point of having the one person, one vote if 500 people really elect the president? Anyway, back to it. Nigel Farage knew he was meeting Donald Trump when he gave this interview. He lied to the press. Nigel Farage is like Donald Trump. However, Nigel Farage failed to get elected 7 times, what means that the United Kingdom, to our Parliament, what also means that the United Kingdom aren't as stupid as America. However, we're getting there. But anyway, back to my main thing. And Piers Morgan, I'm sorry, people are softening to Trump. Have you seen the comments right now about Trump and the NHS on Facebook, on social media? People are vilifying him. When it comes to the NHS, he should have taken the advice and shut up. Said nothing. But he answered the question. This man isn't good for the UK, for us as a UK people. He may be the President of the United States, but grin and bear your time. There is an election coming up, and there's no guarantee that Donald Trump is going to get back in. Anything could happen between now and then. Remember, he is 71 years of age as well. Anyway, so back to it. Technically, he isn't a bad guest right now, but he's on the fringes. Do you know what I mean? He's about to be known as a bad guest. It takes the UK about a year to get over one visit of Donald Trump, and if he wants to come back next year, can I make a suggestion? Can we send him to one of our Caribbean islands or Gibraltar and send the royals to meet them? How about a state visit to Australia? Oh, I don't know why they just didn't put him up to stay in the Tower of London. But, this has just been a bit of a rant about bad guests and bad manners and Donald Trump. But once again, you're listening to Around the World Today here on Real Terrio Radio. This was episode 8, and it is entitled The Bad Guest Trump. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Podcasts brought to you by Real Terrio Radio. Around the world today here on Real Terrio Radio.